For a decade, she drove a company truck up and down the back roads of North Carolina, selling feed to farmers she quietly envied. She had the salary, she had the company gas card, the benefits package, the growing territory, the title that made people say, "Wow, I wish I had your job." And she did it all while quietly building a completely different life, one she wasn't sure she would ever get to keep. Her name is Meredith Bernard. Most people know her as this farm wife. And the story of how she became that person is one that almost didn't happen. Because for 10 full years, she was living like two different women at once. On paper, she was a corporate sales rep. In her heart, she was already someone else. What most people who follow her on YouTube don't fully understand is just how long that split lasted, and what it actually cost her to finally choose one side. Here's the part that changes the shape of everything. Meredith never grew up on a farm. She didn't inherit land. She didn't marry into a farming family and immediately find her calling. She spent more than a decade building a career she was genuinely good at, that paid well, that she loved, while simultaneously becoming the wife of a man who worked the same land his father worked before him. That tension is the real story. Not the YouTube channel, not the tractor, not the hay rake she named Rita. The real story is the 10 years before all of that, and the specific moment that made walking away from a secure, well-paying career feel like the only honest thing left to do. Meredith grew up in New Hill, North Carolina, a place she describes as a one-stop sign town, the kind of place you pass through rather than arrive at. Both of her parents worked at North Carolina State University, one of them with cooperative extension. So while Meredith wasn't a farm kid in the traditional sense, no cattle out the back window, no crop rows to walk as a child, she was surrounded by agriculture from the start. Horses were part of her world. She had a cousin who worked a tobacco farm. She absorbed the rhythms of rural life without ever having to live them full-time. That background pulled her toward NC State the way it pulls a lot of kids from those kinds of families. She enrolled, found her way into animal science, then added a master's degree in agricultural education. The plan was to teach. She student-taught in Durham, and within months she knew it wasn't right. Not the subject, she loved the subject, but the classroom didn't fit her the way she needed it to. What happened next matters more than it might seem. Instead of reassessing her entire path, she pivoted hard toward sales. A livestock feed company needed a field representative in Caswell County, and it turned out she was exactly the right person. She had the animal science background. She understood equine and livestock nutrition in technical terms. She could talk to farmers the way farmers talk to each other, so she took the job, and she was good at it. For 10 years, she traveled the back roads of rural North Carolina, building relationships with farmers, growing her territory, using her degree every single day. In her own words, she sold livestock feed, worked with salt-of-the-earth people, educated clients on equine and livestock nutrition, and loved every minute of it. That last part matters, because what comes next isn't the story of someone escaping a job she hated. It's the story of someone walking away from work she loved, for reasons that only became clear slowly, and then all at once. Somewhere in those years on the road, Meredith had a bad riding accident. She'd always been around horses. It went back to high school, to friends, to a genuine love of riding that had nothing to do with her job and everything to do with who she was. The fall left her rattled in a way that went beyond the physical. Fear after a riding accident isn't just about the body. It sits in the mind and makes you hesitate. And hesitation on a horse creates its own set of problems. She heard about a man named Lawrence Bernard. He had a reputation in those parts for being a miracle worker with difficult horses. When a horse had a problem, people sent for Lawrence. When a rider had a problem, which was often the real issue, people sent for Lawrence then too. That's exactly what this was. And his answer, when he assessed the situation, wasn't what Meredith expected. He told her it wasn't the horse she needed to fix. It was her fear. Those words applied far beyond riding. She said later that his advice had played out in her life in more ways than one, that the principle of going through the fear rather than around it became a recurring theme in everything she built afterward. Lawrence Bernard was a second-generation farmer in Milton, North Carolina. He'd grown up working the same land his father built. He wasn't building a brand. He wasn't on social media. He was farming the way his family had always farmed: cattle, crops, early mornings, long days, and the kind of work that doesn't stop for weekends or weather. He and Meredith fell in love. This is where the double life really begins, because the timeline is important. Meredith didn't quit her corporate job the moment she met Lawrence. She married him and kept working. She had a son, Wesley, and a daughter, Austin, and she kept driving that company truck, kept growing that territory, kept doing a job she was actually excellent at. For years, she existed in both worlds simultaneously. The traveling saleswoman who understood livestock nutrition, and the farm wife coming home to a second-generation cattle operation with no hired help and a husband who needed a genuine partner. The two lives didn't conflict at first, then they did. And then the conflict got louder every single year until something had to give. In 2013, Meredith Bernard turned in the keys to her company truck. She returned the gas card. She walked away from the steady paycheck and the benefits and the career that had defined her professional identity for a decade. She wrote about it on her own website, without softening the edges. She quit the secure, well-paying, awesome, wow, I wish I had your job sales job. She has been clear across multiple interviews about what drove it. Not dissatisfaction, not a conflict with her employer. The job had kept growing in a direction that no longer fit. More travel demanded, a larger territory to cover, 2 young children who needed her present, a farm that ran entirely on the labor of 2 people, just her and Lawrence, no outside hands. And one of those 2 people was spending most of her time on the road. The math didn't work anymore, and eventually, the math wins. What she didn't have when she walked away was a plan. There was no plan B sitting ready. She said as much herself. There really wasn't a plan B. There was the farm, the children, and the question of what came next. She started taking photographs. She'd always been drawn to it, taught herself everything, and built a small photography business. Weddings, newborns, family portraits. It grew, but it immediately created a new version of the same old problem. She was away from home every weekend shooting weddings. She had traded one kind of absence for another. When that business slowed, something shifted. Meredith started writing. She started blogging about the actual life on the farm, what it looked like day to day, the flooding, the broken equipment, the calves, the horse shows, the work that doesn't apologize for never stopping. And then she picked up her iPhone and started filming. That detail is worth pausing on. She launched her YouTube channel with an iPhone and the free iMovie app that already came on it. No production budget, no crew, no strategy beyond. This is our life, and maybe someone else will recognize something in it. The channel grew in a way nobody, including Meredith, fully predicted. Part of what made it work was something she brought directly from the road, the ability to connect with people who had no particular reason to trust a stranger. Feed sales is a relationship business. You earn your way in slowly, and once you're in, people listen to you in a specific way that's hard to manufacture. Meredith transferred that skill to video without consciously switching gears. She just talked to the camera the way she had talked to farmers across Caswell County, directly, without performance, without pretending things were easier than they were. The Bernard farm is a genuine working operation, roughly 110 cow-calf pairs, corn, soybeans, barley, and hay. No hired help. Everything is handled by the family, which means everything viewers see in those videos is actually happening, actually difficult, and actually being worked through by the people on camera. Lawrence appears reluctantly at first. Meredith has laughed about this, describing him as practically a ghost in the early videos, referred to but rarely seen, like a character you hear about before you meet. Over time, he became more present. Viewers noticed. They cared about him in the specific way people care about someone they've watched do honest, hard work. What Meredith built wasn't just a farming channel. It was a channel about a specific family, doing specific work with specific consequences. And the honesty of that specificity is what kept pulling people back in. Floods that actually flooded, equipment that actually broke in the middle of harvest, a horse that was actually mourned when it was gone. The writing she had started on the farm grew into freelance contributions to Successful Farming, Progressive Farmer, and AG Now. She joined her county farm bureau board. She became a keynote speaker with talks drawn directly from her own experience. No time to quit, don't waste the wait, balancing the imbalance. The titles weren't metaphors, they were field reports from her own life. The photography evolved too. After burning out on weddings and events, she stepped back entirely, then returned to it with a different focus. Natural light work on the farm, the kind of photography that gave back rather than took. Everything she built connected back to the same route. The truck keys turned in, the 10 years on the road that came before, the farm waiting on the other side of that decision. But something else was developing alongside all of this, something the audience didn't fully see until early 2025. In January 2025, Meredith Bernard launched a Substack newsletter called Seeking Hope. If you follow her Facebook page, you may have noticed her description change around the same time. Where it had positioned her through farming and rural life, it now reads, Storyteller, Grace Dweller, Hope in the Storm. That is not a small change. That is someone telling you something real about where they are. The Seeking Hope Substack launched January 18, 2025, and from the start it was different from anything she had published before. Not farm updates, not recipes or equipment breakdowns. The posts were personal reflections on faith, on wading through uncertainty, on walking through a season she described in her own words as unlike anything she had experienced before. In a February 2025 post she wrote that she was in a season she hadn't asked for and didn't want, that there had been hard seasons before, and sad ones, but this felt different in a specific way. She was careful with what she shared and what she held back, but the tone was unmistakable. She was going through something significant and writing through it rather than around it. In another post from that same month, she wrote about her mind running through questions about health and cost and what things would mean for her family, the kind of circular, anxious thinking that settles in when someone is waiting on uncertain news. She acknowledged the fear directly and then wrote through it towards something firmer. The Substack grew to over 1,000 subscribers quickly. The phrase she returns to, "Hope in the Storm," now appears across her platforms and has its own dedicated website. It represents a meaningful widening of what this farm wife was into something that matters to her at a different level. She has continued farming. She has continued posting on YouTube. But creative energy that once went entirely into documenting a working cattle operation is now also going somewhere more interior, toward a community she is building around faith, honesty, and the conviction that the hard parts of a story matter as much as the good ones. Looking at the full arc of Meredith Bernard's story, one thing stands out that doesn't often get discussed. The 10 years she spent in corporate feed sales weren't a detour from her real life. They were the construction of it. The animal science degree wasn't decorative. She used it every working day, educating farmers on equine and livestock nutrition, building credibility in a world where credibility doesn't arrive with your business card. It's earned slowly, over many conversations, in many muddy fields. Those relationships were real. That knowledge was real. And when she came home to the farm full-time, she didn't arrive as someone learning from scratch. She arrived as someone who already understood the biology of cattle, the economics of feed, and what farmers needed from the people they allowed into their world. That's a significantly different story than the one the farm wife framing implies. Lawrence confirmed this in his own way. He said that the first time Meredith helped him work cattle, before they were married, back when she was still the feed rep who came through, he knew he was going to marry her. His reasoning was specific. None of his male friends had ever worked cattle that well. They got too excited. She didn't. That composure wasn't an accident. It was the product of 10 years working in close proximity to farmers, learning when to be still, learning to listen before speaking, learning that the quieter you are in certain moments, the more trust you earn. She brought all of that with her when she traded the company truck for the tractor. There's also something worth understanding about the nature of the decision itself. She didn't leave because she was failing. She didn't leave because the job had gone sour. She left something she genuinely loved because another life needed her more. That's a harder kind of decision than walking away from something broken. It requires a different kind of honesty, the kind that acknowledges a cost is real and pays it anyway. The Seeking Hope newsletter, with its direct, undefended writing about faith and fear, is built on the same quality. She doesn't write around the hard parts, she writes directly at them. Meredith Bernard's story is about someone who took the long way home and arrived carrying more than she would have if she'd gone directly. The double life wasn't a deception. It was a preparation. Every farmer she built a relationship with, every mile driven through Caswell County, every piece of animal science applied in the field taught her something she would use later. She just didn't know what it was building toward yet. Today, she is still on the farm in Milton, still working alongside Lawrence, still homeschooling Wesley and Austin, still writing for agricultural publications, still appearing as a keynote speaker, still filming on the farm, better equipment now, same directness from the beginning. And she is doing something new. The Seeking Hope platform, which took shape in early 2025, points toward a next chapter that doesn't have a clear final form yet. She is being honest about that, the same way she was honest about turning in truck keys without knowing exactly what came next. She keeps returning to the same belief she started with. Everybody's story matters, including the parts that happen before the camera turns on, and the parts that happen when you'd rather the camera wasn't there at all. If you had to walk away from a career you loved, a good salary, real security, work that suited you, because something else needed you more, would you have made the same call Meredith did, or would the stability have been too hard to leave?